1 week season.
What is going on, OWS fam, DFS fam? Welcome back to the DFS Lab. I am your host, JM Twin. I'm here with my man, KTM128. Keegan, how are you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm fantastic. I'm ready for this Bengals Bills game.
This Bengals Bills game. We were talking before the show, hence the laughter as we were coming on accidentally, about apparently some of the negative comments on our video where Keegan pulled up the 16 game slate. Keegan, you want to read your favorite comment from the group?
Oh man, it's a lot.
It's a banger.
He says, here we go. Not prepared. Keegan, not prepared. No critical thinking. No original contributions. Doesn't know the salaries or slate he's on, which that was true. Does he even play DFS? I'm not sure why he's on these videos at all, other than to make JN look better.
That was the plan. That was the plan. So as a reminder, as a refresher, part of the whole idea of this show was most of these shows, roster building shows, have two experts on. Our idea here, Keegan's been playing DFS for 1 year, has some really sharp thoughts on DFS, has learned really quickly. I actually had the idea, Keegan, I talked to you about this, but when I was in Oklahoma for Thanksgiving and we were talking at your dad's house, and like some of the thoughts you were bouncing off me and ideas that you had, I was like, oh, Keegan's really sharp with DFS in terms of like thinking about leverage, thinking about how to play off of chalk, when to play chalk, when to not play chalk, how to piece players together, how to play around with game environments, things that it takes a lot of people like 5-6 years to learn. And that's just a testament to the fact that you dove in quickly and started trying to learn the ins and outs, watching Al's show, watching mine and Pete's show, reading content. And so the idea was to kind of have somebody on here who could have the sorts of questions that most DFS players have. A lot of times on our Inner Circle podcasts, I'll read snippets from conversations that Josh Morano and I have. Josh Morano reads the NFL Edge audio, is a really sharp season-long fantasy player, has had a lot of success in that area, but hasn't hit on big success yet in DFS. Actually started to hit on some success this year. But I read the conversation that we have sometimes on those podcasts because they're really instructive. Like the questions that he asks are questions that most DFS players would be asking. So again, that's the concept behind this show. Keegan did pull up the wrong slate last time because he doesn't use the computer, as most of us don't, for DFS rosters. But with that, let's go ahead and dive in. We had a good laugh over that.
That was nice.
Oh, here's another good laugh for you. Somebody else who doesn't like our show. So every night, part of William's bedtime routine is we watch a couple Formula One videos on YouTube. But anytime I pull up YouTube now, our show is like one of the featured things on there.
Oh, no.
And so I'll say, William, you want to watch Papa and Keegan? And he goes, no. Every time. So he's not into the show either. But yeah, with that, Friday. So we're still waiting on some injury news, but we have a lot of things in hand. We don't know who's starting for the Eagles. We don't know if Deebo Samuel is back, which makes a difference on George Kittle's value. No information on Greg Dortch, which I really like at this point. So right now, Keegan, Greg Dortch's ownership projections are coming in at like 8 to 10%. Maybe that's been updated this morning. But we talked the other day about like if Greg Dortch has his 70% role, then he's the biggest smash play at 3K, right? He's like the most obvious guy to put in. But if we had information, if it were like, yeah, well, we played Robbie Anderson and AJ Green for a couple of weeks because of these reasons. And so now we're playing Greg Dortch because that didn't work out. Well, then Greg Dortch would be 40% owned, right? His worst game when he had a major role was 13 DraftKings points. 4 of his 5 games with a major role have been 15 plus DraftKings points, 2 games of 22.3 DraftKings points at 3K in salary. So he would be 40 to 50% owned. We would be playing him just because you probably would have to play him. Instead, he's coming in these 2 duds before this game last week, the 22.3 pointer. He was active and healthy in those games and just didn't see the field. And so that uncertainty is basically allowing us to get him probably at low ownership. So one of the things that I noted is in my write-up for this game was this is the type of spot where I'm willing to embrace the uncertainty. If he gets me 3 points and I lose because of that, that's fine. But I'm willing to embrace the uncertainty. I would literally play him on 100% of rosters this week and be happy with that because the ability to open up that much salary and get a potential separator, like a guy who can score 15 to 20 at 3K in salary and low ownership, is just too good to pass up. So we talked this week about potentially having a Greg Dortch on every roster rule. I'd be fine with that if we want to start with Greg Dortch on this build, but I'm going to throw it over to you and find out what you're thinking on this particular build, which we'll again say is going to be for kind of like 10,000 entry type tournaments this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can definitely throw Dortch in there. Like you said, you want him to be like 100% owned, or it's definitely a possibility, 90%, 80%, just a high percentage owned. So we can definitely throw him in there for this roster. But my question is, the quarterback position is there's a large variety this week. What are you thinking there?
So whenever there's like a lot of quarterbacks, one of the things that I always want to ask is who can actually win me the slate. So in fact, because at the beginning of the week, I was like, ooh, there's a lot of quarterbacks this week. And now my quarterback list is smaller than it's been on a lot of these 10-game slates. And we've got a 13-game slate. So who are some of the guys that are standing out to you? Let's ask that first, because then that'll kind of help us to see like why I'm on the guys that I'm on.
Yeah. So at this like lower salary area for the cheaper quarterbacks, I like Minshew if Hurts is not playing. I like Jared Goff for obvious reasons. I like Russ because we talked about him, and I mean, yeah, he's had a bad year, but who knows? Maybe he can have another like 26-point game. So I think that's a great one to pick. And then up here towards the higher end, I mean, you can never go wrong with Patrick. He is very expensive, but for obvious reasons. Again, like look at this.
Yeah, and when you compare his salary and scoring to like running backs or wide receivers priced around him, like he's the most valuable guy at that price tag, which granted, like cheaper, like the 5K quarterbacks are also more valuable than the 5K wide receivers and running backs, but Mahomes has like major value for sure. Anybody else that has been kind of standing out to you?
Fields as well. Yeah, I like Fields.
Okay.
But like you said, you kind of took me off him just a little bit. I stepped back just because of the fact that, like you said, he has really nobody to throw the ball to. So
yeah, so that's the list that I've condensed things down to myself. And then Trevor Lawrence is on the list for me as well. Trevor Lawrence is going to be really popular this week, and there's some potential reasons to stay away. So I'll leave that for write-ups on the site. And if you're watching this and you haven't read that up, it's in the NFL Edge in the game write-ups for the Jacksonville-Houston game. But yeah, the thing about these guys, right? Like Trevor Lawrence plus Zay Jones have 3 games. I think it was 3 games of like 60-ish points, right? And they cost $11K in salary. And maybe it was like 2 games like 50 plus points, and then 1 game of like almost 70 points. They cost 11.2K in salary. Jared Goff has all these games of like 23 points, 26 points, 29 points. Basically, Jared Goff has 6 games that are better than Aaron Rodgers' best game. So I think that the salary structure here is very interesting, right? Because you've got these guys like Daniel Jones, where you kind of look at him and it's like, oh, he can hit. Deshaun Watson could technically hit. Aaron Rodgers could technically hit. Tom Brady could technically hit. But like Trevor Lawrence and Jared Goff are just sort of mispriced. Jared Goff, this is off the top of my head. I wrote this up yesterday, but I think it was he's 6th in the NFL in passing yards, like 5th in passing touchdowns. He has fewer interceptions than all the other guys who are above him in those categories. And over the last 5 weeks, and that's just full season stats, right? Over the last 5 weeks, the Lions have basically realized like, hey, we need to shift to like a Goff-centric offense here and just pass the ball. So you look at this last 5 games, he's thrown the ball at least 37 times in all 5 games. So early in the year, they were kind of a run-based offense. They would pass the ball if they were forced to, and now they're proactively passing the ball. So he really should be priced at like 6.8K, 7.1K, which is usually the top end of like the non-mobile pocket passers. The Tua Tagovailoa is up there at 7K. Justin Herbert, who hasn't been running as much this year, is at 7,100. And that's really where Goff should be at this point. So yeah, he's going to be popular, but I don't think he's going to be popular enough. And as we've talked about, Goff, everybody just thinks Goff plus Amon-Ra St. Brown, but you can go Goff plus DeAndre Swift, Goff plus DJ Shark. There are different ways to pull the trigger there. And it could end up being like a piece that hits and you just needed to have it. And then, yeah, I'm with you on Fields. Like, obviously, I'm with you on Fields because you're with me on Fields. But Fields is like, it's hard to see him putting up a 40-pointer with nobody to throw to. Then at the same time, I also recognize, what if he does put up a 40-pointer, right? And Goff puts up 26. So I like the idea of playing around with some Goff rosters, but then also playing around with some Fields rosters that they don't even have to pair him with anybody. Cole Kmet scored 22 points in both of those big Fields games, but they were multi-touchdown games, right? We could randomly get Velus Jones scoring a touchdown, Equinemius St. Brown scoring a touchdown, Dante Pettis scoring a touchdown. Cole Kmet gets some yards and doesn't hit, and Fields could still put up 40 points. But then you could go Fields plus Shark, or Fields plus Amon-Ra St. Brown, or Fields plus DeAndre Swift. So there are some fun ways to play around with it. And again, we're talking about like building a lot of rosters and then putting them into different contests, putting them into some multi-entry stuff. So from that standpoint, I like Russ as well. But yeah, on like tighter builds for me, it really is down to Goff, Lawrence, Mahomes, Minshew, or Hurts if Hurts is in there. And then expanding beyond that, Fields and I could go with Fields on some tighter builds as well. But then Fields and Russ really stand out to me next from that group, followed by Mike White behind those guys.
Okay. So you mentioned Hurts. Now, do you think he's going to get the same type of like plays that he usually does? Or do you think they're going to kind of lay off of the more like run heavy, run Hurts around kind of offense that they've been doing?
I think that's a great question. So Nick Sirianni has said that if Hurts is out there, they will run their normal offense, but coaches lie, right? So I would think that if Hurts is out there, they don't necessarily call as many run plays for him, but pull up Hurts game logs real quickly, because there's something I want to look at here. And that is what has happened in the games where he actually, like where they leaned on the pass. So Washington in week 3, he put up 30.6 DraftKings points. Tennessee in week 13, he put up 37.4 DraftKings points. Pittsburgh in week 8, he put up 28.4 DraftKings points. Those were all games where they went proactively pass heavy. He still got, 9 rush attempts against Washington, and he got 5 rush attempts against Tennessee. Pittsburgh, he had only 2 rush attempts in a game that they totally dominated. But it's interesting, right? Because like our perception of Hurts is, if he's not getting value with his legs, he's not as worth playing. But this 37-pointer against Tennessee was his second best game of the season. At the time, it was his best game of the season. The 30.6-pointer against Washington was one of his best games of the season. Again, 28 points against Pittsburgh. So really, to me, even if they're not running him as much, they're still going to be Hurts-centric. They're still going to be passing the ball with Hurts. And so either way, I'm pretty comfortable with the Hurts play if he's out there. And I think we'll probably see slightly lower ownership because some people will have that concern and then won't have the answer to that question. So the fact that Hurts has been so strong through the air in his non-rushing games kind of takes away that concern for me. I think that he's valuable if he's out there. And if he's not out there, we saw what Minshew did last week. We saw what Minshew did last year. We talked last week about what Minshew was capable of. He's still underpriced as well, just because it's so easy to distribute the ball in this offense to these great weapons.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. And I mean, again, Hurts is just like Mahomes with these points. I mean, you really can't go wrong. And they're priced.
Yeah. He's not going to hurt you. And I mean, he's averaging more points per game than Mahomes. He's averaging 28. Mahomes is averaging 27.7. So, And then you look at like Herbert's averaging 18.3. That's 10 points fewer than these guys, and he's like only like 1K less essentially. Yeah. So the value of just like, if you're not paying down for these other guys, the value of jumping up. And again, like if we're talking tournaments, you can always justify, if you're building 60, 70, 80 rosters, you can justify like 2 Herbert builds, right? You could justify doing something like that. But like when we're talking about where we really want to focus, I mean, these are the guys this week. These are the guys who are likeliest to win us tournaments.
Okay, awesome. With all that said, I think maybe we can let's price up. Do you want to do up this week with the quarterback?
Yeah, that's an intro. I don't think we've done, what have we done so far? We've done a Goff roster, and I don't remember what our other one was, but a Goff roster and a Mike White roster, maybe.
We did a Russ and a Mike White.
There you go. Let's go ahead and we'll probably get a Goff roster in tomorrow if we don't do one today, but I'd love to see what like a priced up roster is, and there are some fun things we can play around with. Actually, we might we can go Hurts and just say, hey, what if Hurts plays, right? Or we could go Mahomes, and there are some interesting things we could do with a Mahomes roster.
Okay, yeah. And then that'll allow us to also throw Dortch in there for a little salary saver.
Yep. I like it.
Cool. So then let's
all right. So going Hurts. And I like this too, because I think a lot of people, They build, so like Hilo sent a text today in our group text that had he was talking about how fun this week is and like all the fun things you can do, and it had a Hurts roster and then like all these plays that he loved, including Greg Dortch. And then Mike said to him, "What are you going to do when Hurts doesn't play? What are you going to do with all that extra savings when Hurts doesn't play?" And then you like sent a second roster that had Minshew and like the other ways that he could build that roster. And it's great because most people, they want to be in this, they don't want to like have this uncertainty, right? So they want to grab a piece that they know is going to be playing. And so when we get this information on Hurts Minshew, they'll be kind of like that's not as prevalent in their mind, right? So the idea of building a Hurts roster right now when we still don't know is pretty cool because it helps us to see like, okay, here are some things we can do. And then we can always change around the pieces based on the salary structure, or we can go down to Minshew and then have some extra savings for somewhere else. Who do you want to pair Hurts with on this build?
So in like a week that I did win pretty decent, I had Hurts and I had paired him with AJ Brown and Devonta Smith in one lineup. And then another, I just had like each separate lineups with just one wide receiver in each one, just in case, one of them doesn't hit, because it's totally possible that one of them can hit,
right,
one of them doesn't. So I'm thinking we at least get one, if not both, in this one. What are you thinking?
Yeah. And it's interesting. And I love that strategy. And when you're playing, Hurts is like the only high-priced running quarterback that we've actually seen hit without any of his wide receivers. So there's also a viable path to playing Hurts with nobody else, which usually people do that because they don't know who to pair the guy with, but it's negative EV because one of his pass catchers is going to hit and somebody's going to have that pass catcher, and then you're competing against them, right? There is also a pathway where Hurts hits without any of his guys. I don't remember which game or games it's been in, but it's been once or twice this season where he's hit and none of his receivers have. But I say that to say, like, in your approach of like, okay, we'll build this several different ways, that's another way that you could build it. But more than likely, if he's hitting, one of his pass catchers is hitting, and either one is just as good to me. Devonta Smith's role has been less consistent when Dallas Goedert's been healthy, but he's also a little bit less expensive. So either way I guess he's not that much less expensive after he hit last week. He's up to 7,100. So let's throw AJ Brown in there. And it's kind of shaking up the salary structure. And also, we talked the other day about wide receivers, right? Jefferson put up 42 points last time against Green Bay, but he's still going to be playing a really good pass defense. He could put up 15 points this time. Tyreek Hill has Teddy Bridgewater, and he's playing against New England. The Raiders have benched Derek Carr, so Devontae Adams has Jarrett Stidham at quarterback. We also looked at the running backs, right? Like, if Christian McCaffrey is not getting 30 touches, if he's getting 18 to 20 touches, he's probably not putting up more than 25 to 27 points. Austin Eckler has seen his role shrink a little bit. Josh Kelly's getting more touches just to kind of save Eckler's body. Eckler, mostly he's a 20 to 25 point guy. Saquon hasn't topped 26 points since week 1. Jacobs is in this, what's going to be a broken offense against the 49ers. Chubb can't top 30 points, right? So it's like, what if AJ Brown goes for one of his 35 pointers and then everybody else is focused on these other wideouts, these other running backs, and they all go for 15 to 25 points? Like, you're just so far ahead of the field in that instance. And I think there will be some fear on playing Jalen Hurts if he's out there. And so, a build like this, when we talk about what can get you to first place, it really opens things up. And then on top of that, we have like Greg Dortch at lower ownership than he should be at, which is just a bonus in my mind.
Right. Well, all that being said, would you rather go defense or tight end on this to figure out our salary here?
Either way, we're not going to the Eagles defense, obviously, because we've got Hurts and Brown. And in my mind, so my defense list, I would be willing to branch out of it, but my defense list now is just the 49ers, Patriots, and Eagles. Patriots average 11.3 DST points per game. 49ers average 9.5. Eagles average 9.4. Next best team is the Jets, all the way down at 7.3. Patriots are priced at 2,600 because they thought the Patriots were playing Tua. They were already too cheap then. Now they're playing Bridgewater. The 49ers are priced at 2,900 because DraftKings pricing thought they were playing Carr, and now they're playing Stidham. They were already too low priced, right? So to me, it's like these defenses are pretty much a lock for like 7 to 11 points in like a mediocre game, right? And so there's no need to get too cute at defense. So in terms of salary structure, we basically know what we have here. So we can throw in 49ers or Patriots, and then it's just like we can move around from there based on what happens, right? If we have a little extra salary, we can move up a little. If we need a 300 in savings, we can move down. But since we don't have the Eagles, it kind of sets defense for us. We can throw in either of those and then kind of decide where we want to go at tight end.
Okay. Yeah. That being said, what out of those three, 49ers, Jets, and Patriots, what out of those three like have the highest chance to get like a 15, 20-point game on this slate?
I would say 49ers first and Patriots second. 49ers first. Jets are not going to be like heavy in the mix for me on the road against Geno, who doesn't make a lot of mistakes. I'd say 49ers first because Jarrett Stidham has, I think it was 4 picks and 61 career pass attempts. He was, New England drafted him to be potentially one of the guys they could develop to be a starter. He was not very good, and he's still not very good, right? So he could have a horrible game. And then New England next, because New England 3 straight games of the defense special teams touchdowns, 7 defense special teams touchdowns on the year. So they're always in the mix for a game like that. But yeah, 49ers first, given that they're playing Jarrett Stidham on a team that's kind of throwing in the towel right now.
Okay. Awesome. Let's do it. 49ers. And then I kind of feel like we should maybe get like a running back established, but we can also, go with the tight end just to get more of a sense of our salary.
Yeah, you guide this one. Wherever you would typically go next, I'm good to go next.
Okay. I mean, typically I'm like just a quick build. I build these things decently fast. I would go to tight end, and then so what I usually do is I'll have a set, kind of like you say with the defense, is I'll have a set amount of players that I really like on this slate, and then just go with one of those that can match my salary.
Yeah. So who are some of the tight ends that you've been seeing?
I like the more expensive ones on this slate, to be honest with you. That's kind of how I've been building my stuff. And the guy that I've really been liking the past 3-4 weeks is the Hawk. I love the Hawk, man.
I'm assuming you played some of him last week then?
Yeah.
Good for you. I was not on Hockenson at all because I was like, I don't get it. Everybody's wanting to play him. He's going to be high owned. He hasn't done anything major with the Vikings, and he went out and put up almost 40 points. Throw in Hockenson. It's basically a bet on this game environment, a bet on somebody from this offense having a big game and it being Hockenson instead of Dalvin or Justin Jefferson. So we placed that bet. Now, at this point, what I would want to look at is how much risk we're taking on. Not much yet, right? So I see Hockenson as a higher range of outcomes guy. So I wouldn't want him on a roster where where a lot of my other pieces are also high range of outcomes guys, right? Because if he hits for 40 points and then you have 5 other pieces that are broad range of outcomes and they all hit their lower end, you waste those 40 points. But if Hurts is starting, AJ Brown's broad range of outcomes, but if Hurts hits, that elevates chance of AJ Brown hitting. Greg Dortch is not a broad range of outcomes. If he's playing, he's getting those points. 49ers are not a broad range of outcomes. We're basically getting some points for sure with ceiling attached to that. So from this point, I would be willing to take on a little bit more risk if we wanted to. But at the same time, we're kind of working with a low-owned structure here, a low-owned setup, because we don't think that Hurts is going to draw a ton of ownership. We don't think that AJ Brown is going to draw a ton of ownership. We know Greg Dortch isn't going to grab a ton of ownership. So we can literally do whatever we want here and just grab favorite pieces, essentially, at whatever position we want. We've got some salary considerations to figure out, right? Because we don't want to be boxed into having to play 5K running backs if we don't want to. So maybe the next thing we would want to do is see who one of the other salary savers is that we would want to go to and see what our salary looks like from there. Okay,
awesome. Yeah. Somebody who's not necessarily super cheap, but who I just like this week is DeVonta Swift.
Oh, DeAndre Swift. Yeah.
DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, throw him in 5,100 this week. And we've likened him on this show to Jerick McKinnon, right? They basically have been getting the same touches. We've seen Jerick McKinnon go for 30 plus points. So it's possible to go for a huge game in this role. 5,100 on DeAndre Swift. I like that. And now we've got a little bit more salary flexibility here to kind of figure out how we want to close out this roster. What are you thinking next? Wide receiver, running back?
Let's get a receiver. Let's try to get a salary saver. I feel like we can get more, a little bit cheaper receivers with the salary that we have right now.
Yeah, we've probably burned the ability to use Shark here with Swift and no other bets on that game. And so I kind of like that because it's easy to just get boxed into being like, okay, and each roster, I like Shark, so each roster lock him in, but right, he still has a broad range of outcomes. He could go for 5 points. So you don't want like all of your rosters tied to Shark, even if you're going to be like for me, I would be probably 30-40% Shark on my builds because I feel pretty confident in his ceiling, right? But I also want to give myself some pathways to winning if Shark misses. So this Swift roster basically is a way to say, hey, maybe Shark misses and Swift hits instead. And then, I don't know who else you're seeing down here. Curtis Samuel is interesting with Carson Wentz back. McCole Hardman could be back this week, although we don't know yet. As we've talked about before, the Patriots wideouts are always capable of putting up a big game, but it's kind of just a total guessing game. Anybody you're seeing from salary saver wide receivers?
Well, I was going to look at St. Brown's game log because he did help me out. Might have been last week, actually. Yeah,
it's pretty dirty.
Yeah.
There's the Dante Pettis randomly had a 17-pointer, and that's literally it. Like outside of Darnell Mooney, who's like a legit NFL wide receiver, Dante Pettis had a random 17-pointer, and that's like the only useful score from these guys. Honestly, we've talked this week about mid-range pricing being totally viable. So I wouldn't mind going to like Drake London, right? To where or even JuJu Smith-Schuster, one of these guys who could get us 20 plus points, Zay Jones. Although if I'm playing Zay, I probably want Trevor Lawrence along with him. So we'll scratch him off the list on this one. But I wouldn't mind going to one of these guys who aren't really a salary saver, but it's still lower than our average salary left. And, we'll be able to get a 6K running back, which is probably all we need. Or we can go up to like James Conner at 7,200. We're probably not playing Dalvin Cook on this Hockenson roster. We have the salary to go to if Christian Watson might not be playing, right? So Alan Lazard, Romeo Dobbs, opposite our TJ Hockenson bet. There's a lot of different ways that we could go here, and we don't necessarily have to go super cheap and take on like an Equanimous St. Brown who his great game is going to be like 8 or 9 points. Like we could go for a guy who can get us 20 and spend a little bit more.
Okay. All that being said, Dotson did me really well. I think it was last week.
Yeah.
So, how do you think the defense is against receivers?
I'm not concerned about the Browns defense. I'm only concerned about play calling. The Browns have been in this mode of like, let's hide Deshaun Watson. And because of that, because Washington has been super run based ever since benching Carson Wentz, like the question is basically Carson Wentz is back. Do they say, okay, we benched you earlier this year for all your mistakes, but we're going to go pass heavy again because you're back? Or do they say, okay, we've been winning running the ball. We're playing Cleveland, who isn't going to try to score points, and they have a really bad run defense, so let's just run the ball. So that's what I would expect, is them to go kind of run leaning in this one. But at the same time, Dotson can still get 5, 6, 7 targets, right? We went through this last week, but 18 points in week 1. He only had He only had 5 targets in that game. 17 points in week 2. He only had 5 targets in that game. Against the Giants, he had 9 targets with his 16-pointer. But again, only 6 targets in his 23-pointer in week 15. So, this guy can hit on 5, 6 targets. And he has a couple of 9-target games this year. So, you know me, I love Dotson. He's finally getting priced closer to where he really should be, but I'd be fine going Dotson in this spot for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, it'll save us some salary and maybe it'll hit. Love it. And then do you want to finish this running back over here?
Yeah, so what do we got? Is that 6,300? I guess I could turn up the brightness on my screen and actually see that. 6,300. And that basically allows us to go any running back we want below the 7,500 guys, which, like I've said, we're not getting up to Christian McCaffrey on this roster. We're not getting up to Eckler, and I think Saquon, Jacobs, Chubb, they're all overpriced, right? So that allows us to say, hey, look, do we want to go Etienne at 6,400? Do we want to go James Conner? I like Conner a lot. He's consistently going to put up 23 to 25 points. Ramondre Stevenson's going to be popular this week. He's consistently going to put up 20 to 23 points. We can go to any of those guys, or we can go down in like the cheaper running backs. And I almost feel like we go to wide receiver next on this. Well, not necessarily because we have flex. I was going to say wide receiver next because then we get a sense of like where we go with running back, right? Because wide receiver, if we pay for like a 5,800 running back, then we end up in like the 6K price range at wide receiver, it's pretty thin this week in the 6K price range. It's like Keenan Allen, who's always overpriced, DK Metcalf against the Jets, Chris Godwin, who has one good game all year, Mike Williams against the Rams defense that doesn't allow a lot of downfield passing, Tyler Lockett against the Jets defense, Mike Evans, who hasn't hit in 2 months. So we don't necessarily want to just box ourselves in, but since we have a flex available, we could go running back here as well. So basically all that to say, I'm fine going anywhere we want. We could pick our next wide receiver, or we could pick our first running back and then kind of see what that leaves for salary in our last spot.
Okay, awesome. I like Etienne. I said this earlier. I mean, I know you said they might not use him as much. His usage might go down this week, but I still think, it is a good play against the Houston run D.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, he's going to be popular also, which on a roster like this, I don't mind that because we're doing enough that's different. Dotson isn't going to be super popular. I don't think the Hurts AJ Brown pairing is going to be super popular. I think Dortch's ownership will go up, but he's not going to be prohibitive. And so this is a spot where we could basically, like, even me not really liking Etienne this week as much as a lot of other people do. This is the type of roster where I could say, whatever, I'll throw Etienne in and ride the chalk on this spot, because DFS, a lot of it's not about predicting what's going to happen. It's about understanding how to put together rosters that maximize our chances at a first place finish. So this is a spot where I could say, hey, maybe I'm wrong on Etienne and Etienne ends up hitting this week, right? I can just ride that chalk where I'm going different on a lot of other spots in this roster. So Etienne, and that's going to leave us with some funky salary left, right? 6,200, where there's not really like a clear play at 6,200 to, like, I guess McKinnon, if we wanted to go with a running back, but he's a broad range of outcomes. What's that?
What happened to Kirk? So every time I've stacked him with Lawrence, he's been a dud for me. And I feel like closer to the beginning of the season, he was doing a lot better.
Yeah, it's just sort of the randomness of this offense, right? His targets haven't changed. His role hasn't changed. But week 1, he had 117 yards. Week 2, he had 2 touchdowns. Week 3, he had a touchdown. And then the touchdowns have dried up recently. In week 10, he had this 34-pointer where he had 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. But it's basically just that touchdown variance, right? Where he hasn't scored in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. And so you go that long without scoring, all your scores are going to be a little bit lower. I guess one of that was the bye week, but 5 consecutive games he hasn't scored a touchdown. But yeah, the usage hasn't changed. And this is the sort of thing where people can say, basically that, what happened to Kirk? And it's oh, nothing happened. He's still the same player. He still has the same ceiling. And if people I think Zay Jones is going to be popular this week. And so if we can say, well, what if instead of Zay hitting, Christian Kirk hits, they basically have very similar roles, very similar target counts. And so, yeah, Christian Kirk is a guy we could go to here. Another option is to go from 49ers down to the Patriots and go Jerry Jeudy. But yeah, I like the Kirk play in terms of how we leverage what other people are doing. The only concern there is we have Kirk and Etienne, which isn't they're definitely taking away points from each other. So now that we had the isolated Kirk discussion, now I look up and see Etienne on the roster. And it's I probably don't want to do that on this particular build.
Right.
But McKinnon, Miles Sanders, I'm looking for guys who can score 30 points, right? Kirk is in that discussion. McKinnon, Miles Sanders, Christian Watson, we'd have a little bit of salary on the table. That's totally fine. He may not be playing this week. If he's not playing, Aaron Jones is banged up. A.J. Dillon at 5,800 actually becomes pretty interesting. Probably can't get us 30 points, but could get us 25 points if everything comes together. So yeah, I'm fine going any of those directions. And this is the type of build too, where I might spend – I like the basic structure of this, right? And I might spend 2 hours messing around with 10 different variations of the starting point, right? Where we started Hurts, Dortch, AJ Brown, 49ers defense, DeAndre Swift. On those last 4 spots, I could mix and match this 20 different ways, right? And spend a couple hours just playing around with all the different ways to do this, which we obviously won't do here because we're already over our normal time. But I would throw somebody in here. Any of those guys are fine. And then I would kind of sit around with this one and just piece things together different ways until I find something that really clicks for me.
Okay. I mean, I know we're tight for time, but what do you think about going JuJu and then taking out Dotson and see what we can do?
Yeah, go for that.
Awesome.
So what does that leave us? That leaves us 5,200. And if we look at that, well, I guess there's not any running backs down there that we want. But yeah, I mean, Brian Robinson's there. Zonovan Knight's there. Cortland Sutton's there. Zay Jones is there. Although we still have Etienne, so that kind of throws that off. Drake London at 4,900. That's probably what I would end up doing is Drake London at 4,900. And
okay.
Similar play. He's opposite Greg Dortch. Similar play to Dotson, right? But Drake London, look at his targets his last 3 games, right? 12, 11, and 9 targets. That's no joke for like a guy who's legitimately NFL ready, 95 yards, 70 yards, 96 yards. He's basically the same player as Dotson in like a rookie wide receiver who doesn't play like a rookie wide receiver. And he's basically guaranteed right now, like close to double-digit targets, whereas Dotson, as we saw, it's kind of like maybe 5 to 6 targets, maybe 8 or 9 targets. So Drake London, another guy who's going to be popular, but I don't mind riding the chalk on this piece and moving up the field with whatever points he puts up.
Awesome. I love it. Let's do it. Yeah, he's consistently got like 13 plus points in the past 3 games. So
yeah. And I mean, and that's without touchdowns. That's without, he's had 2 games where he was 5 or fewer yards away from the 100-yard bonus. So we always want to think about that because that's an extra 3 points that we can just drop right onto his score if he gets those extra few yards. And the fact that he hasn't gotten them makes people look at the scores and it's like, yeah, but he hasn't really gotten up to 20. But it's like, yeah, but if he got 5 more yards, then, he's sitting at like 19 points, right? Even without a touchdown, he has a touchdown to that. That's 25 points. So, yeah. And I like this roster. And real quickly, I got to get out of here because I got that show with Pete in a couple of minutes, but we can run through the points here, right? Like Hurts plus AJ Brown can go for 70 if everything comes together. They don't need anybody on the other team hitting in order for them to hit. So we don't need a New Orleans piece. Still sharp there. Swift can hit for 25 in a great game environment. That puts us up to potentially 95 points. Etienne can hit for 25 to 30, but we'll call it 25. That puts us up to 120. Dortch can hit for 20. That puts us up to 140. JuJu can hit for 25. That puts us up to 165. Hockenson he can hit for 40, but we'll call it 25. What were we at? 145. That puts us up to 170. Drake London can hit for 20. 49ers defense can hit for 20. That puts us up over 200 points. And as always, when we do this, we're not going for like crazy outside the realm of reasonable possibility scenarios. This is like all very reasonable things for these players. So yeah, and we take on like a good range of risk, a good range of low ownership on this roster. So definitely a roster that has a nice shot at a first place finish here. Keegan, any final thoughts before we hop out of here?
No, I love this.
All right. As always, thanks for hanging out. We will see you back in the DFS lab on Saturday, and we will see you on OWS throughout the weekend. We will see you at the top of the leaderboards this weekend.